I wanted to record this because I was sure that the other time I said some things, you said some other things, but then in the comments it seemed like it was different, and I wanted to go back and uh, understand well what you said, and I didn't understand by the time. So this is my record because I can't keep track of things.
For sure.
If you are okay with that. So I was telling Daniel here that this morning Drupal.org wasn't great, and I spent like an hour, putting my heart in a comment.
I did the same thing like 4 days ago.
Right, and
Yeah.
then it all went down to the toilet because Drupal.org was flaky at the moment, and then I was, fuck it, I'm not gonna type everything again.
Yep.
So I see that Redditor saved a backup because Daniel just told me go and check that, but I'm not sure how to restore that, and I think that I should be able to recover from there, but I don't know how. I don't see. So if you guys know, I'll restore last input. Am I gonna delete this? Let me put this in a JavaScript variable now that I've got it. Oh, dude, it feels so wrong to type JavaScript in the browser. Reset this form to your last submitted values. I don't know. I don't wanna.
Yeah, copy and paste somehow the variable as well into your.
Yeah, no, it's what I did, and it restored the last comment in whatever issue I was.
So that sounds like you don't have a backup actually.
No, but I have
Is
some.
everything in there?
I have some. I mean, I can see part of the comment.
Oh really? That's interesting.
Anyways, I will work on getting this. Now I want to export my JavaScript variable to a file somewhere.
That was
But
awesome.
Oh yeah, is it actually possible? I guess no, right? I mean, that's kind of the promise of browsers and sandboxes in there that can't get out.
I could probably have JavaScript read it out loud for me, but
And you just
and then
use,
and then
then
record
use
with the
some kind
sound
of
card.
yeah.
Anyways, sorry. So there were like 4 big concerns there. The first one was that if we go with the suggestion that you have in number 13, and I don't know if you guys are in the issue right now. I'm gonna paste it in Drupal Whiskey. So the problem in there is not about listings, it's about when getting the individual entity for the resource. So when you get node 1, right, if you use that, you get an article. If you get node 2, you get a page, and that is a problem because you can't have a resource having different types. So that is one thing. The other thing regarding this point is that even if we just said, okay, we're going to be smart and we're just going to, if it's node/1, we're going to put the type equals, I don't know, node, and then put all the article. And if it's node 2, type equals node, and then all the page. So the problem is in there is that the list of the fields for the type node is different depending on the ID, and you can't have a schema, and that is something that I really care and feel very strongly about, because having a uniform schema allows us to say, hey, give me documentation about the resource node, and then you get documentation, and that is what Daniel is working currently, and you get a beautiful page that you can point and click and get good descriptions on what the field is, what type, how you can create a form element out of this, etc.
Right.
And if that is dynamic depending on the ID, you can't really say, give me the schema for resource node.
Are we planning to, so I totally agree that the schema should be the same for node each time, but there was something that I mentioned in my comment about the JSON schema, and there is a mechanism to provide subschemas using like a compositional approach. You can say one of, any of, all of, and we could provide a thing saying, okay, if there's an attribute named bundle, and that bundle says article, and then it has the subset of fields which make it an article versus a page. We can say a node can have a title, a body, a status, a created, and an updated. Now, if it also has bundle article and then a subset of article fields, that can be a valid schema validation, as well as if it has instead bundle page and the set of fields for a page, it will also validate as a single schema using that concept of one of subschemas.
Right.
Understanding it, but if it is a possibility, I think it's kind of an elegant approach.
Yeah. One of and any of, etc., and all of is a good way to do schema composite for validation, but I don't really think it helps us with creating documentation. And besides, I don't think that you can use that in a dynamic way. Like, you need to create, to know in advance all the schemas that you want to include in the one-off, right? And then you don't have the possibility of having this dynamic generation, because you don't have the possibility of creating this documentation, because you don't have that dynamic value that says bundle, right? Because if you ask for the documentation for a node, you don't know anything else, right? That dynamic nature, you don't have it until you load an entity from the database.
Right. Okay. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I don't know that that's necessarily how I understand it, but of course my understanding could be wrong.
I mean, is there like a complex example of using any of? And all of, is there like a concrete example out there? Because like the URL you pointed to didn't really have an example.
Yeah, let me find another example here.
I'm using a JSON schema to create schemas for resources, and the way that we are using it, and I'm not saying that is the only way, is by providing a list of references, right? And that reference is a schema for an object. So you could say that a particular property could be one of the following, like integer, positive integer, or maybe float, or maybe null, right? This is kind of the usage, but you have to have that defined in advance and add it to the schema.
So it's not possible to include a sub-schema within. That, like, I saw nested schemas in here.
Yeah, you can add sub-schemas. The thing is that then you can't know which documentation you can generate. So we would have, in that scenario, we would have a schema for node that all it says is a node, the schema for a node is either an article or a page, right? And we then have a schema for article or page. And then it's all referenced, and for validation, that really works. The thing is that how do we create documentation for Node, right? Because it can be either one or the other.
I lost your sound.
Oh.
Now you're back.
Sorry. No, what I meant is that at that point, if the schema of a node it can be either a page or an article, and you want to generate the documentation for the schema of a node, which would be the NID, the UUID, the created, blah blah blah. How do we know at the getting the schema how to generate the documentation? Because all we know is it's either a page or an article. But which one do we generate? If we choose one, we are wrong. Either one of those is going to be wrong.
Right.
And
so I guess I was imagining including for the schema that we generate for Node, using the one-of property, and then including a subschema for each bundle type available at the time you generate it. So it has to be validate as one of those bundle types. If you give me 2 seconds, I can type up a quick example.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
And I don't know if this is entirely valid, but we'll get the point across, right?
JSON schema, by the way, is one of my technical fetishes.
You'll be able to validate it better than the machine just by looking at it.
Not really, but I'm really attracted to the idea.
Yeah, it's very cool. Okay, status created and title. Let's say body. And I have this like JSON plugin for Vim, and I cannot stand it, but it's the only thing I've gotten good highlighting for. But God, it will just hide the quotation marks that I put in at random.
Mm-hmm. I just realized that whatever it is in the local storage is not what I'm looking for. Wow, wow.
So I do not think that this is perfectly valid, and I'm not even sure that it's correct, but I think it gets the idea across, right? So at the top level, you say the type is node, and there are a set of properties which belong to all nodes, and then you say it's one of these subschemas, which are article, page, or article or page, and you can provide a set of properties unique to each one of those. By providing the bundle attribute, you then basically, if you say it validates as one of those, you have to include the bundle property as article, and thus all the other fields or attributes specified in that subschema become have to be included.
I don't know whether that's valid, but I would have expected to be like the one-off in like a level above. So it's
and that could be the case. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it's one of like the schema of an entire article or one of the schema of an entire page, etc.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that it's possible to. I mean, it is totally possible to validate, but I don't think it's possible to say, hey, give me the schema of a node. I don't know, with that information. I mean, with just saying, give me the schema of a node, with that approach, I don't know how that could work, but maybe I'm missing something. I want to move on to the next to my next point. If you are okay, maybe we can revisit this later.
Okay.
So the next thing is that we are going to have to support computed entities, right?
Yeah.
That is something that we all want, and I don't think that we can have, if sorry, when I said computed entities, I meant computed fields. And by computed fields, I mean not the computed fields that get loaded with the entity, but something that is only unique for the HTTP API, right? So you can't imagine that one of the fields is an attribute, right? You can't filter by that. Imagine that your computed or generated attribute is a random number. You can't expect to be able to filter by that random number. It doesn't make sense. Or imagine that you are creating a computed relationship. You can't expect to filter based on that, right? Because there is no MySQL connection, and even if you go further than that, it may be stored in different storages, which makes it even more complicated, right? Because every entity can be stored in different storages. So with that in mind, these two items, we want computed fields, attributes, and relationships, and we can't really provide filtering or sorting because we can't because that is driven by the storage, and those computed fields are not in storage. It is pretty easy to detect that a field is computed or generated, and we just disable all operations that require a storage, like write operations, filters, and sorts, basically. So I don't think it's a big deal. If it seems that that is kind of a thing that you're highlighting, I don't know if you disagree with.
Yeah. No, I totally agree that's the case for computed fields. But I am saying that if we do treat a bundle as a computed field, right, and we're just kind of arbitrarily imposing the idea that this is related as some separate resource or having to include it as a computed field, we prevent ourselves from doing filtering, sorting, and things like that. Yes, you cannot do it with a computed field, but it is an arbitrary decision that we're imposing, because we do know that those properties of being an article or a page are sortable, they are filterable. And so we're just saying...
Does it basically mean that it is not computed, it's, I don't know, derived or something?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the example of like fields which just exist on a certain bundle, for example. I mean, technically there's no no reason why that shouldn't be possible, right? I mean, it is in the storage layer, so we can filter and we can sort, but I guess we just don't have a wide word or abstraction for it, because yes, it is not a simple field, but it's also not computed. So maybe we need something in between or something.
Right. I guess what I was saying is that I felt that, and perhaps this just really is impossible to validate at the schema level, but I felt that if we included the attributes of all attributes for a particular node, be it a page or an article, right, then it still, without any additional effort, without any change, you can still filter and sort and do those things. Whereas if we put it behind a relationship and only include those node properties, then it becomes unsortable, and it doesn't work to do sparse field sets and things for attributes that are members of the bundle. So I'm not saying that computed fields, oh man, we were missing that. I'm just saying if we decide to treat the relationship, that bundle piece, as a separate relationship and put it behind a computed field, then we're creating that problem for ourselves.
So
right?
what I would say with that is that my first step in my point was to establish that for derived fields, I like that word better because it doesn't create a confusion between the computed fields in Drupal. With the derived fields, we have operations that we can support. The operations that are tied to the storage, right? So that's my first point. Now let's move to the idea of having the entity level to bundle level relationship as a derived field. We are saying that we can't have filters on that, but that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to want filters on there. In these, now that we are talking about this specific use case, so if you want to filter based on the created date, you can do it, right? For the entity level. If you want to filter based on the field tags on the entity level, though, you're doing it wrong. You need to filter because that field, the field tags, is in the article, is in the bundle level, because that field pertains to the bundle. Then you need to be filtering not /node, but /article, /node/article.
We're getting a bit technical. I mean, technically, you could filter by like something like not exists and say, give me all articles which have no tags, as well as pages which do. I think that's a very bizarre use case, but I see your point.
I think that if you, just go to the correct place.
Right. So let me pose this like possible scenario to you, and this is the one I'm kind of thinking of, and that's like something akin to the home page, that default view or something that you might get, right? Where you want to say, show me the most recent updated content. And so that implies that you're getting all attributes from a collection at the node endpoint, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're using something like Ember, or you're using some framework where you've created templates and models to represent things like an article and a page and do that well, so you are including all the subproperties of those specific bundles, and you want to include that in a single listing, that seems like a valid use case. And by treating them as relationships, we're adding some additional business logic of, in order to create that, you have to hit the node endpoint and then include all those relationships, and then only show the relationships in your listing rather than the top level that you receive. I see that very similar to just creating a view of rendered entities of node not filtered by type, and that seems like something that happens a lot in Drupal, and maybe, I definitely see your point. I just see, like, in terms of developer experience and stuff and those things, by providing the attributes at that top level, and again, this goes back to the schema piece. That's, I think, really at the heart of this argument.
Yeah, but I think that that is true, but that is what we used to do before we put the content first approaches, right? And we would just generate an API and its output and its design based on the views that we have. Instead, now what we do is we create semantic silos and we create relationship between those so we can compose everything. So as you said, to generate that list, all the pieces are in place, and you can say, "Hey, don't give me for the nodes for the resource node, don't give me any field, right?" So you get as little clutter as possible, and then you only use the includes. This is just like in GraphQL, this is very obvious because you post a query. In JSON API, what we do is we craft the query in the URL. That's the only difference between the two. So we are giving all the options as the server JSON API server implementation. We're giving all the options to do whatever. If they want to do that, what you just said, they can do it. If they want to do a view that only has a template for the fields that are common for an entity, let's say a token entity, right, that has an expiration and whatever, and you can add some extra fields to it, but you just want to represent the token, you can do that as well without including anything. Like with this, I feel that this approach is more in the spirit of JSON API, and by reading the issue that you gave me, and this kind of leads into my third point. The creator of JSON API says exactly that when talking about hierarchical and inherited resources. He says that it's not a good idea. It's like when we are defining the tables in a relational database. Oh, wow, butterfly. Yeah, so he says that instead of that, what we should be doing is doing composition, and instead of inheritance. Like an article is a node, right? But we don't have to inherit everything from a node. So his suggestion is even more radical than what I'm suggesting, which is from the node, we have a resource that defines what a node is, and a node for us is what is common to every node. I mean, it's what it is in the definition of a node, without the things that come into bundles. So we have that, and then we have the bundles, and the bundles are additions to the node. So what he's suggesting is, as I said, even more radical, because he would say that if we go to /node/article/1, since we are hitting the article, the bundle resource, we only get the fields that are specific for the bundle. So we wouldn't get the NID, maybe, yeah, the NID, we would get it as the ID, etc. We only would get like the entity reference fields and the tags and maybe the body and whatever. So I don't know, maybe we should move in that direction. It seems like a little bit extreme to me, and a bit too verbose, but I think that is the spirit, and that's why I think why this whole idea makes sense of having a relationship, just a relationship between what a node is and then the article complete. If you need it, it's there. And this is just a nicety because we could just put a link and require you to make a second request, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think I think I finally. I mean, do you feel like you understand my point to this, and I feel like I understand yours? So are we on? I think we kind of know like everybody's opinion at this point.
Yeah.
I guess I would just say at this point, like, I don't want to hold it up any longer. So if you and Daniel think that this is the way we should go, I will lower my big red flag. But the last question I'd like to ask is just that if we could generate a valid schema for a node which would support these things, do you feel, so if that were the case, do you still feel that treating it as a separate bundle relationship would be the correct approach? And I guess that's really all of these issues just come down to a schema difference and our inability to, or possible inability, to generate a valid schema. And if we could, I do think it still remains more useful just to include all the attributes, not have the relationship field. And I think that's really just what it comes down to. So if it is the case that you think it still would not work if we could create a valid schema, then let's go full schema ahead.
I think, yeah, I wouldn't have. So two things. From an API design point of view, I'm leaning towards this composition, like having a clean definition where it only has the fields that they pertain to a node. To me, what pertains to a node is only what it is defined as a node, not anything else that comes from bundles, right? So that's one of the points that I would make in that scenario. But that would be like a whole different discussion, because that would be an API design discussion and not a technical feasibility discussion, right? So if it is possible to generate documentation, to just say, hey, give me the pretty page that tells me what the fields that compose a node are, and it says it's an NID, which is an integer, and it's required, etc., and it shows you that page. If we can still do that with that approach, I would love to move to something that is more comprehensive to developers that maybe don't know why we took these decisions. So yeah, even if I would think that the API design is kind of a little bit weaker, I would be open to it, and I would love definitely I would love to review that patch and give it a go.
Okay, so why don't we do this just to unblock things and get things move on? What if we just we go with the bundle resource relationship as you've proposed, but as you said, and document the hell out of it, and let's flag it as something which is experimental or something while we create a spike to look into the schema generation.
Okay, that works for me. So we could put let's reconsider this if we find that the good solution for it, because I agree. I mean, it's kind of confusing if you don't know why all this is happening, but then when you go into every corner, you maybe get the reasoning about this, and if we feel that we can do everything else from the other perspective, and that is better, yeah, let's do that patch.
Yeah, cool. It seems to be that it depends, like whether you as a user are coming from Drupal and just want to render something on the front-end side, or whether you are a front-end developer and you're like you have to use Drupal. And I guess when you are a front-end developer, you are maybe more aware of JSON API and know how it's designed to be. But when you are like coming from the Drupal side, you are more aware of what a node is and what an article node is. An article node has a node ID in the title. So it feels like it really depends on the use case we want to prefer.
And what I was saying is, if you're not coming from Drupal and you do see this thing, while it is maybe more pure on the JSON API side, it is a bit deceptive because we do have the concept of the node and then the article, and we're kind of suggesting that they're separate resources when they're not. And I know that like underneath the hood we communicate that they're single resources, but we are suggesting that there's a difference there. So
yeah, I mean, especially when you do a post or something on like the node resource, that would be really confusing.
Yeah.
Actually, we should maybe forbid that, because I mean, it never makes sense to create a node without the fields, right?
I don't think that you can create a node without a type.
Ah, I see. Yeah, that's true. So
actually, how would that work?
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, the type is still part of the schema of the node, of the generic node one, right? But the fields aren't, so you wouldn't.
You can create an article just by providing, I think, a title to it, a title and a type.
Right.
So you could post to the node resource.
But I mean, what's the use case of that? Like, is there a use case?
Creating test data, I guess.
But I mean, you can still do the same with the article specific.
Yeah, that's actually what you should do.
Yes.
I think that we are only talking about this because of the whole let's create entities and bundles and reuse fields but not use the nodes at all. So a node entity is not usable without a bundle. So I think that's why we are in this conversation at all.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think we should answer the question: which user do we prefer? Do we prefer the Drupal to frontend or frontend to Drupal user?
I would like, and obviously I'm just speaking for myself, I would like to have JSON API that you can't tell, or it is difficult to say that it's a Drupal API.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow this entire argument, Dries, for example, made with API first, I mean, that's basically it, right? API first, and there's a Drupal behind that. So I mean, that's a detail. So yeah, maybe we should like ensure that we don't do any kind of Drupalism in the JSON API.
Well, I mean, by including like bundle resource field as a thing, right? That is exposing the Drupal idea right there. That's very clearly a Drupal site as soon as we do that. Granted, right?
But we are only talking about this because we want to be able to support something that is Drupal E, which is getting all the node entities, right? You in any other CMS you can't do that, like, because there is no concept of a node. There is no node to group different resources by, right? So maybe we should just take a step back and not have this node at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more fine with that than, well, I don't know, because then it makes it hard to do those administrative points.
Yeah, that's why. So that's exactly why we didn't have them at the beginning, and then we added them.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, for administrative listings, it is kind of okay to have a worse performance. Would you agree with that? Like, I mean, that site is so complex anyway, I guess, compared to that the front end. So, like, having additional requests seems okay. especially because it's still just.
I don't know. Because I think
I'm
there's
scrolling
also
into
the
the track.
migration case. There's also the like I
Okay.
said, just the homepage listing or something. But
But if you wanted to do a request that lists across entity types, that is another use case, right?
yeah.
So how would you do that? Do we provide a solution for that too?
Fire hose. I don't know.
Right.
I don't even want to think about this.
But do you see my point? Maybe we are providing a solution to something that is very specific, and at some point we just have to say it can't be done. Just like we cannot do a list of a list that includes, I don't know, nodes and taxonomy terms at the same time. Can we do that with views?
No.
No.
You cannot do that, right? So there are things that we can't do.
I mean, yeah. I mean, there are things on the SQL level which would allow us that, but I mean, there's a limit somewhere. I know that Search API allows you to index across entities.
Right, because it denormalizes the data and it puts it in its own store.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we could say if you need that kind of capabilities, like listing stuff across entity types or even across bundles, then you need something like Search API, and then somehow integrate Search API with JSON API, right?
Right. Yes, I like that. Let's drop the entity. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, there will be a lot of people complaining about it because they can't build like their Drupal-specific backend UI.
Okay, let's then. It's easy, right? They can create a view, get all the IDs, and request those IDs. And
if they really want to. Yeah, I mean, if they really want to, they can. That's true.
There are different ways of doing it.
And we could actually say, like, that's a problem which is so hard to tackle at the moment that we defer that and rather, focus on the things we can focus at the moment, and then, like, say, yeah, that's a 2.0 feature or something. But
is everyone on board with that idea? Just nuke the.
So I was
concept.
actually.
Okay.
It was breaking up. If you'll just restate it, I think I am, but if you'll just restate the idea, then I can say thumbs up.
Okay, so what I think that we are all coming into is, fuck it, we don't want to do this across bundle things, because from a REST point of view, our entity types are bundles. And just like you cannot have views that combine items across Drupal entity types, you cannot have listings in JSON API that combine items from different resource entity types or across different bundles. So the entity level resource goes away. We revert that and forget about this, and we move on with our lives.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, why not? Let's kill it. I mean,
yeah.
And we can document. We can document and say it is too much of a problem because JSON API and whatnot, and it is not. I don't know. It's not the common use case, right? It's rather more like a 20% use case or something. And
right.
Then we say we defer that decision and whatever.
And we can provide ways of doing that, like denormalize this into a separate storage and have that be your new resource.
Right. Or reference the hell out of things.
Yeah. I like that. So I'm gonna ask you, Gabe, and you can totally say no, I just don't want to, but could you document what we decided a little bit, because I know that at least for me, not English not being my mother language, it's kind of a okay, good, nice simplification.
Okay,
let's get some red
I don't know if you have to go. Do you have 2 seconds more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. two things. Where should I document that? And second, are we still going to provide access to those bundle resources at /node/article or node-article or something like this?
Yeah, I think so, because
yeah, cause of conflicts, right? I mean,
because of name conflicts.
I mean, yeah.
We can create aliases. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think that we can keep that in place and then rethink how to make these URLs prettier and less Drupal-y, and especially the resource types. Those are super ugly with double dashes. But let's say that we tackle that at in the second phase, in phase 2.
All right.
I love that company name, phase 2.
All right, cool. Thank you. I'm glad that we could. I don't know if it's agreement, or I'm glad we just could give up together.
Yeah, that.
No, it was actually a very good, collective thinking. We put a lot of arguments that may be useful for other issues, and yeah, was productive.
Okay.
And
I still would love to see the relationship interface and a way to provide those as well as computed fields. So let's do those.
Definitely, we need to keep So there is another issue that abstracts the relationships and to its own thing, so we can have computed relationships. We will need to keep those, but I will just refactor the code because it was kind of relying on this issue. But we can keep that.
Cool.
It's just like an intermediate class on top of entity reference.
Perfect.
So that would be one way to have back references if you want.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, personally, have you used the relation module in Drupal 7? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't used it, but I have played with it.
Oh, I love it, and I would like some way to implement something like it with the API and Drupal 8. So.
In theory, you could do that for the with this abstract relationship class.
Yep.
You could register anything, and it would be available to you as a computed relationship.
Right. So.
Anyways, I have to drop.
All right. See you. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
It was great. Happy weekend.